Hello all, I hope you are doing well in these unprecedented times. There's another unprecedented for those playing the unprecedented drinking game. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena where we're hosting you today. Today, I'm quite excited for this. We are joined by the founder and CEO of Coco Invest, Omar Shaikh. Omar, how are you doing today? You're in Copenhagen?
I'm in Copenhagen. Yes, it's a sunny day in Copenhagen today. Nice to be here.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. And as well as being a CEO and founder, you're also a trade and investment advisor for the Scottish government.
That's right. I was very humbled to be invited by Nicola Sturgeon some years ago, and they seem to have collected a number of sort of industry key people in industries to help Scotland industry grow globally. So I think it's, we operate in a really unique industry, and fintech is quite, it's a large industry but with its own features. So it's great to sort of be part of that.
What does that mean, being an advisor for the Scottish government? What are the kind of things that they're wanting to know?
Well, most of it is really looking at the sort of strategic positioning of Scotland. And being from a small country, obviously we've got Brexit going along as well. There's a lot of different elements. But I mean, for Scotland, where I went to university as well, I've got a very strong connection to Scotland, and it's very important for them. For their financial industry is incredibly important and a key aspect to the economy. So they are looking particularly at things like fintech. Where are the opportunities? Where are the threats for the industry? Where should they put their resources to develop that industry for themselves? And there's no roadmap. I think it's only by talking to people actually within the industry that they can actually get an inside on the ground idea of what is working. Things change so fast in this industry, and the barriers to entry are pretty high, and you've got to put resources where you're going to get the most benefit.
Absolutely. Well, so you went to university in Scotland. You're representing Scotland. Your background is London, you're in Copenhagen, and Coco Invest is in Bahrain. So, remote working must be good for you.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, actually, I mean, my wife is Danish, and I worked in the financial industry in London for many years. I started out my career in the hedge fund industry, like a lot of people, and it's a fantastic city to work in. And particularly to start your career in. Copenhagen is a great place to base yourself because we have amazing access to talent. We actually have an office in Copenhagen. We have a technical team also based in Sweden. But our head office is actually in Bahrain. So we come under the Central Bank of Bahrain. And I'll get into that a little bit more, why we made that decision. Why? So essentially, we left Denmark in a way. We still live here, but we sort of left Denmark because we were introduced to Bahrain, and we were kind of invited by the central bank, who, like a lot of smaller countries, are putting a lot of effort and resources into developing the fintech industry. So for us, as an Islamic compliant fintech, it made a lot of sense.
So, I mean, Denmark as a region, you've got some incredible things with Copenhagen capacity. Similarly, again with Bahrain, there's the guys that invest Bahrain, and there's Bahrain Fintech Forum, which is phenomenal. I had a very, very good time there last year, but I think it might have even been the year before that. Let's talk a little bit about Coco Invest as an Islamic robo-advisor for customers in Denmark and beyond. What's the story here? What inspired you to create this? Was there an aha moment? Here's the issue.
There wasn't. I mean, being from London is an amazing melting pot of different cultures, and growing up and going to school in London, it gives you almost a sort of unique perspective on the world. Every single person from all over the world is represented in London, and it needs to be remembered really from the financial industry that really ethical investments have become incredibly popular. In the last few years. But in actual fact, traditionally, they weren't really on the spectrum, sort of even looking back sort of 10 years ago. Whereas Islamic investing has actually pretty much all the elements of ethical investing and always has done. If you compare side by side the ESG or ethical investing and an Islamic compliant fund, the crossover is absolutely phenomenal. Although, sadly, most people don't know a huge amount about Islamic investment funds. So, for us, for me, growing up in London, it was really very much awareness of there isn't, in general, the best funds really aren't that easy to invest in. And, the access to quality financial products is still, sadly, not really there. And that's in London. There is Islamic investment banks in London and retail banks. But when you start stepping out of that, looking further afield across Europe, for example, the ability to access quality financial products is completely not there. So, growing up, I was constantly asked for advice on, how to invest, access to Islamic funds. And I met many people on the road that really, it's such a driving force to invest in something that is Islamic compliant. And it's such a fundamental thing for the consumer that it meant that those people wouldn't invest, ended up not investing because they were really uncertain. So there's a real demand for it. I mean, there really is a real demand for it, not just from those who are driven by their ethics or their faith, but actually for anyone who wants to invest in ethical products.
Absolutely. I think, taking obviously the religious aspect to one side, I think particularly following the financial crisis, there is a demand for that level of ethics, especially over the last few years. And I love free trade. I use it all the time, and there's a few WhatsApp groups around it, and it always makes me laugh the amount of messages that say, "Yep, I've just been investing in green stocks to keep my conscience clear." There's been a few kind of messages like that. There is the demand there. But the one thing that there doesn't seem to be outside of Islamic finance is any kind of set, this is morally acceptable, this is not. And that's why, again, Islamic finance is phenomenal, because it puts a bit of black and white around morality.
Exactly. I mean, what's not quite? I mean, we've all heard about greenwashing. Funds sort of now getting on the bandwagon, sort of saying, "Look, we're ethical." Where actually, if you scratch beneath the surface, they're not. And there's a lot of that in the industry, because the industry wants to survive. Whereas, much like UCITS did for the asset management industry and the funds industry, Islamic compliant funds, they have to adhere to a very, very strict criteria. The consumer therefore knows what they're investing in is certified by a third party, a qualified third party. That has to be constantly reviewed and recertified every single year. So for the consumer, they want quality products that perform, but they also want to have the confidence that what they're investing in actually adheres to what it says it is investing in. And that's really, really important for us and for the consumer, because the last thing you want is to go through and intend to invest in with good principles, and then find out your fund is really anything but. So that's why, for us, it's really important that not only how we conduct our business and the relationships we have is Islamic compliant in every respect, but also the funds that we use to build up our client investment portfolios are very well run and are completely certified.
I suppose, well, that ties in on your website. I mean, you use the term ethical investing. Why do you have that as kind of the listed term as opposed to Islamic investing or Sharia compliant investing?
It's a really good question, and this often comes up actually. I mean, the reason is, Islamic funds are ethical at absolute DNA, their absolute core. But what we want to do is really open up the prospect and the understanding of what is an Islamic compliant fund. And to do that, we want to capture the interest of as many people as possible. I mean, we go to lengths to explain that these are Islamic compliant investments run by some of the biggest names that everybody's heard of: HSBC, Franklin Templeton, BlackRock. These are all names that everybody's familiar with. But what we want to do is really explain and get across that they're not just for people who are driven by their faith. It is really open and for anyone to take a look at. Some of my very, very good friends, in London, they've decided to move things like their pension into an Islamic compliant fund because it's an ethical, it's good performance, and it's incredibly well run. So, whatever your motivation is, we want to encourage as many people as possible to take a look at it.
I always feel that ethics tend to be kind of between long-term and short-term. And that a lot of things that may be, say, financially good in the short term may not kind of apply that well in the long term. What's your stance on taking morality out of the equation on the sheer capitalist long-term view of ethical products from a very monetary perspective?
Well, I mean, our funds are all designed for long-term growth. We don't believe in short-term gains. Really, one of the principles of Islamic investing is that everything must be backed by an asset. So if you compare one of the most used instruments, an Islamic bond, versus a traditional bond, which is a debt principle, you can't do that in Islamic finance. It has to be backed by an underlying asset. So that, by very, very nature, is much, much more long term. And it's the underlying principle is that of risk sharing, a relationship between the party that's borrowing the money and the party that's providing finance. So it's much more of a contractual relationship. And it's, these particular products are used for development projects, large infrastructure projects and things like that. What we're starting to see as well is a very interesting space with green sukkuk, so green Islamic bonds. So those, as the name suggests, are investing only in ethical green projects, where the investor can invest some of their money into those projects and take the benefit of an ethical underlying project. So these, by nature, are long term.
Now, when it comes to actually guaranteeing these investments are Sharia compliant and also ethical as a whole, how do you do this? Is there a very detailed algorithm, or is there kind of still a human factor involved in all of this?
Right. Well, all the funds. Any manager that starts out, you have to screen the investment universe. The investment universe for Islamic compliant funds is vastly smaller than the traditional industry. You constantly have to screen. But to answer your question, is that it is incredibly strict what can and cannot be considered Islamic compliant. That's just looking at what a fund can invest in. But then on top of that, how they gain exposure also has to adhere to a very, very strict criteria. You cannot invest in any company with high excessive debt, for example, has unsavory practices, or any financial company because of the interest rate criteria. But also how a fund operates, much like a UCITS fund has to operate in a certain way, the same as Islamic compliant. And it really is a basic principles that goes through the entire process to make up the makeup of the fund. And it has to be certified by third parties. And it's these rules and regulations are incredibly detailed. They're not for the faint-hearted. They are incredibly detailed, and only certain individuals are able to certify these funds. So, in a way, it's a much stricter portion of the industry than, say, just a traditional fund, which you can put almost anything in. It is very, very strictly controlled. And to obtain an Islamic compliant certification isn't a one-off thing. It has to be constantly reviewed, and every single year they have to be recertified.
Well, with that, in terms of kind of the actual way that you're interacting with consumers, I'm assuming it's all via the app majority. What are some of the favourite features? But do you know what? Whilst you tell me some of the favourite features of the app, I'm going to download it.
You can try, but we haven't launched it yet. So, we're live. We're aiming to be live in about 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh wow!
We've been building our technology for about 4 years. We've put so much investment into building the absolute top technology. As such, we've partnered with things like TrueLayer, We just entered a partner with TrueLayer. Really, really interesting set of guys. And that opens the door to some of the most fascinating things that we can do in fintech. So we're building a whole host of AI tools. These help consumers obviously connect their entire financial life to the products and goods and services that they want to consume. We only host and we only will present Islamic compliant products and ethical products. That's what we do as asset managers. But the doors that are being opened with open banking are really absolutely phenomenal. And it's again one of the reasons we're so happy to be headquartered in Bahrain. The Central Bank of Bahrain were one of the first people in the region, if not the first people in the MENA region, to roll out open banking legislation. And the impact, I often get asked this question, but the impact of open banking is going to have a really huge impact for the consumers in a really positive way. Not so good for the incumbent banks, possibly, but they also can gain the benefits. But I think for companies like ours, it really opens the door for what we can do and develop some really exciting tools for the consumer.
With that in mind, I do want to, so obviously you're working with TrueLayer, but let's talk a little bit around your approach to building this application and building that out. What from a technical perspective, has been your way of doing that? How do you balance between working with third parties and building stuff in-house? Because I think gone are the days where everything is on-prem, built by an in-house team of developers. Now you can literally have people that are just the best at doing KYC or the best at doing whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and I think it's a really, really healthy thing. One of the hardest things for us was finding the right partners. We look for companies to work with that are absolute specialists at what they do. So we've partnered with the likes of, actually a lot of our relationships come out of the UK. For many reasons,
Fintech capital of the world.
Well, exactly. And I think because of the competition in the UK, we've got some incredible talent and we've got some really good companies that are specialising in what they do. And for us, we need to have the confidence that where we do outsource, we outsource to the very best of what they do. So, for example, covering the likes of KYC and AML obviously is hugely important for us, that we only get investors that we want to have in, and we adhere to all rules and regulations. So we partnered with the likes of Fido. It was a long process. They did a lot of due diligence on us. Likewise, we did an awful lot of due diligence on them, understood how they go through their process, making sure no corners were cut, and they did exactly what they said they were going to do. And we're really happy with that relationship. And likewise with TrueLayer, they are they're a relatively young company, but they're taking a very fresh approach to what they do, and they're very forward-looking. And for us, we've got to have 100% confidence in our partners, as they do with us. So I think what we're finding in the industry is that it's, a lot of the heat's come out, and I think what's left is really, people can see very quickly these days who are the good players in the industry. The barriers are getting higher, and I think a lot of the naivety has kind of come out of the industry as well. So service providers are equally as cautious about who they want to accept as customers.
Absolutely, I think that's gone are the days where anyone can come on. There is that back and forth now between third parties and FIs. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yeah, and rightly so. We it's for everybody's benefit, particularly the consumer. The consumer doesn't want to have taking on the service and then find they're out of business. And ultimately, it's about protecting the consumer.
With that in mind, so what, from your perspective, what's been the biggest challenge so far? Because I'm sure there must have been a few bumps along the road where you thought, how are we going to get past this? Yeah,
there have. I think one of the misconceptions in fintech is that because the consumer sees an app and everybody thinks, well, it's just an app. That's dead easy. No, that is really once you're building it from scratch, I would say 95% is the unglamorous code behind everything that we do. For us, it is the relationships. It's building the right team. The right team of asset managers, the right team of investment team, the programmers, the solution architecture, the compliance team, getting the right individuals that understand what you're doing. Islamic investing as well is a very niche. It shouldn't be niche, but it is still considered quite niche in what we do. And building the right team, I would say, was one of the biggest challenges. But aside from that, it's finding, for us, a real turning point for us is when we decided to rebase ourselves in Bahrain. Because with the Bahrain Central Bank, we found a regulator that wanted to, is committed to employing the rules and regulations absolutely to the letter. They very much follow a lot of the UK model. They're very close links with the UK. But they are completely committed to building the fintech industry. So they are operating much more as an enabler. And they take time to understand what we're doing, understand that maybe the rules and regulations as they currently exist may not be completely applicable to us, and they need to understand what we do. And I think for us that was a real turning point. So there's a lot of work being done in different regions. I have to say that's not the case everywhere. We, as I say, we're in Denmark, and there's a lot of countries that want to build fintech industry, but they are failing. They are failing. So, it's not the same story everywhere. So that's really, really key is to base yourself where you have a regulator that wants to do the right thing. Banking as a service, software as a service, very, very difficult to get right. But once you have those right relationships, they need to invest in you as much as you need to invest in them. So that is really key, really, really key.
Absolutely, it does seem that it's a different way of looking at it, rather than actually managing the code yourself, which is quite a large specialist thing. You're almost managing third parties. Just throwing everything into the cloud as a service is not just a magic bullet. It still requires that effort, that understanding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do a lot in house as well. We've really built our technology. Our whole back end has been built in house by a really experienced, good team. And I think that the reason why we did that, and although there were components that we could have outsourced, we wanted to remain complete control over the process and what we did. I do think it's a bit of a mistake. I have seen some fintechs over outsourcing for speed, and I think that is a huge risk. Where there is really sensitive stuff, we want to keep control of that, and we can build it from scratch. So we're not dependent on other people's systems. We don't like black boxes. That's far too scary for us. Ultimately, we're the ones regulated. So if something goes wrong, it's our neck on the line. So we need to have complete control where it matters, and the only way to do that is to have most of the core elements in house.
Well, with that in mind, what are the plans for the future? I mean, what's the moonshot in terms of every country in the world? What's the goal?
Yeah, I mean, we're very ambitious. We think there's a huge demand for what we do. We've done almost no promotion and marketing, and we've got an absolutely phenomenal waiting list. And we're getting emails every single day from every corner of the world, in fact. So yes, geographically, we want to be pretty much everywhere we can be. But in addition to that, we're building a lot of AI tools, and we want to continually develop within our core capabilities, which is asset management. So we're looking at Sharia compliant real estate investment trusts, probably based on a Nordic underlying investments, which we think is pretty unique, and I think there is a very, very good appetite for that. And so within asset management, we want to do a lot, And we are developing a lot of really exciting tools that help the consumers understand more about how they spend money themselves, how they can optimize how they spend money, and also look at products, where we can see that we can replace a product they currently consume with a better product, cheaper product that actually serves their needs better. Those are the kind of things that we're bringing to the consumer, so that through us, a consumer can see their whole holistic life. And so that's where we're going. I mean, we're also obviously looking at Islamic pensions as well, which we think is very, very underserved in the industry. And we're looking at money transfer as well. So there's a whole host of things that we can do for the consumer, so that when they download our app, they can see all the things that we can do for them. And throughout their financial lives, they can pick up the bits they need to, the bits they want to do with us, and knowing that everything that we do is completely ethical, completely Islamic compliant, and we've sourced the absolute best products and services.
With I just have a very random thought. There's no Sharia compliance applies to obviously businesses as well as individuals. So I'd imagine if there's any kind of pension firms out there, effectively wholesale, there's a big gap in the market there.
Yeah, absolutely huge. Yeah, there really, really is. But it comes down to the access. Most consumers don't really have access to these products or aren't aware of it. So that's why we're on a bit of a mission to not only serve those that are underserved, but really sort of get the message out there that these are really, really good products. And if you're ethically minded and you want a good product that does what it says it does, these are definitely worth a look.
Yeah, excellent. The last thing I want to ask, and I love asking companies this. So in Durham, will.i.am sits on the board of Atom Bank. Snoop Dogg obviously is the face of Klarna, super smooth. Who would be your pop culture icon at Coco Invest? And it could be literally anyone, moonshot, living or dead. We've had people say David Attenborough, which I thought was amazing. We've also had people say Will Ferrell.
Right. Interesting picks there. I would actually go with one of my favourite artists, and it's a chap called Sami Yusuf, and he's from London, like myself, but and he was actually born in the exact same year as me, actually 1980. But he's very, very popular in the Islamic world, and he's very outspoken as well about his views and the work that he does with charities, humanitarian. And I think it really encapsulates a lot of what we are, as well as the company, that it's not about just building a great business for profit and things like that. We have an obligation to do more and give back as well. So I love what he's doing. If you see interviews with him as well, he's really, really worth listening to. And he's outspoken, but he follows up what he believes with his actions. So he's done an awful lot of stuff for very, very worthwhile causes, raising money and releasing music where all the proceeds go to help people. So and he's also a phenomenal musician. So that would be my pick.
That's a great. Well, Sammy, if you're listening, and I know you are, then give Omar a shout.
Please do.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Good luck with the launch. I'm going to be jumping onto the waiting list. But I've learned a lot from this, so thank you very much.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure.